And do note, before we continue, I hope everyone takes this with a grain of salt. In my personal belief, I don't think any of this is real. I'm just going to be honest with you. I know a lot of people are saying this is hypothetically a possible real thing that they have sent to many people and they're getting it in their emails. But I legit think a lot of this, just the way it's worded out and the way it's put in these features and categories, it just seems like somebody wrote this up rather than an actual Blizzard developer. But then again, if it is legit, then we'll go by it one by one and then go from there. So let's continue with the video. So they talk about here revisiting known but unexplored zones, and they're asking it in categories, so they're breaking it down in each section here about visiting zones that were a part of Warcraft's history but never playable in the original classic WoW, such as Hyjal, Uldum, or Gilneas. I think that's cool if they want to go, with adding more layers to the world that we already love. I think that's great. I think it's cool that we see some new quests, new, areas to explore with, Hyjal, Uldum, Gilneas. I think this is all good stuff if they want to mess around even with the Caverns of Time and bring us to different points of history within Warcraft. That's cool as well. So I'm not against this whatsoever. For me, I think this is just a no-brainer. I think we all in the comments probably can just agree, yeah, okay, let's see what you guys have to offer, and let's see if it really is what you guys are quote-unquote cooking for the future. I'm looking forward to that. So as far as 1v1 duel arenas, they talk about the ability to go into a special dueling area for 1v1 contests that are viewable by spectators. I think that is a cool idea. At the same time, though, how much more of that idea is, evolved from just only 1v1s from like a sandbox point perspective where it's just us, the players, creating the immersion and creating these fun little contests, right? But at the same time, is there more to these systems? Like, is there 2v2s? Is there 3v3s in this type of arena? Is there rewards? Is there leaderboards? Is there a title? Some type of, cool cosmetics that you get through arenas, or, even gearing? What exactly is more involved in this specific duel arena? Because it's cool if it's just a 1v1, sandbox style, we as the players create the immersion and create the fun events. That's fine, but there's obviously more dip to the chip to be added here in this context, where this question is much more loaded than we think, and I really feel like that with more hands-on involvement from Blizzard, if they were actually to add more support for, PvP in like a dueling sense arena, with the actual, balance of classes and all this stuff overall, I think we can finally get somewhere with what people would like to have, at least for the PvP player base, right? Since it is a part of the, the World of Warcraft history, I think it would be really cool to see what they can cook up with that. But for the most part, yeah, I think it's cool just to have arenas involved with any form of classic WoW, and it gives more people things to do. It gives them a reason to want to compete, and I think that's pretty cool, in my opinion. Account-wide perks and progression system. So a system that allows you to spend or gather points and spend them on account-wide bonuses such as quality of life and convenience, encouraging playing alts or specializing in specific activities. I think there's no problem with this for the most part. There's really not a super negative. I would say, like, okay, this is like game breaking. I'm sure there's always someone that can find something that they can exploit with this, and this would be some kind of cause of problem leading to a potential forum post, and somebody would complain about something because it took away from the grindiness of the traditional game, and now that since it's account wide, people no longer have the incentive to have to go to this location, thus leaving that place either dead on arrival or there's no life over there. But at the same time, it does add a convenience factor, which they even use this wording, where it does make other players say, you know what, I'm going to make alts now, and I'm going to still be more involved in the world than ever before. Because a lot of people traditionally, when it comes to Classic WoW, at least for some people that I know, I'll just say, I won't judge for everyone, but for some people that I know, they don't like to make more than 1 to 2 characters. That maybe some people are just one main Andes. They just like the character they pick. That's the character they embody, that's they play, and that's what they enjoy. Not everyone likes to make, 6 to 7, 8 alts, and there's people out there who like to make a lot of alts. And to be honest, I used to be on the side where I wasn't super alt friendly, but as of lately, I actually enjoy making alt characters. I think it's very fun trying a new character out, learning everything they have to offer to the game, because then you learn that character's weaknesses, and you learn the character's strengths, and you understand the macros and what kind of abilities tie to another. And I enjoy actually alts more than I thought of previously back in the day when I was really heavy on just one main character. So I think it's cool to encourage players keep playing the game, because at the same time, when you offer such convenience, you also make players want to play the game more. And when people play the game more, there are more people involved in the game. So I don't think this is really a massive negative more than anything, even though somebody can probably nitpick this and say there's a potential problem. I think there's a more overall positive on this scale compared to the negatives. Now let's talk about new class. Character classes that are completely new to any version of World of Warcraft. Example, Death Knight, Monks, Demon Hunters, and Evokers. Now I think this is very cool if they wanted to go down this route. At the same time, as much as it's cool it is, and and it's really going to be something that people more than likely want to see involved in Classic Plus to spice up the game a little bit, it can get very scary. Because, when you hit the original structure of what Classic WoW was, and the convenience of all the classes and how they operate in every end, you start playing around with the meta of things in both PvE and PvP, and now a lot of things change where it feels like the class that you have implemented into the game doesn't feel like it fits, right? It doesn't feel like it stands across its partners from all the other classes in the spectrum. And I really feel like adding a class like, for example, even like a Demon Hunter, right? That is a very high, just an example, just a very high mobility class, and that would be much more mobile than a rogue. People would lose the incentive to maybe even play rogue, because Demon Hunter is just so much more fast paced, and it's a faster class as well, trying to fight against mages, right? But that's not saying that people wouldn't play rogue still. It's the same example even with like Death Knights. Some players will not even want to maybe consider playing Paladin or Warrior, because the Death Knight is just a very strong CC heavy class, and it involves a lot of stuns and pulls, and it's a tough class. It's a very strong overall class. And you could say the same things about Monks and Evokers and their counters as well. But I think the point is that even if it was a new class, right, over any of these other classes, I just think it needs to be handled with care. It needs to be on the levels of where Classic is right now in terms of like the damage spectrum, and look where everything is on a PvE end, and look where the classes are on their strengths of a PvP end. But at the same time, as you look at their strengths, you have to also recognize where are the weaknesses, and you have to embed weaknesses in every class in order for a class to prevail and have a player understand their weaknesses and play to their strong suits when it comes to both PvE and PvP, and that class needs to match that. So it's a very intriguing thing to spark as a question for the Classic player base, because at the end of the day, like, let's be honest, who doesn't want like a potential high elf, or like maybe even a Death Knight if you really wanted to, or something of that nature. I'm not sure what the new class would be, but I'm not against this, is what I'm overall getting at. I'm not against this. But at the same time, let's handle this with caution. So proceed with caution, but I'm not against it. I'll say that much. Cross-realm guilds. Ability to invite your friends from other realms to join your player's guild. This is more like a retail thing, I'm assuming. I don't really know too much about this part. I don't really care, to be honest with you. I don't think, like, legitimately when it comes to, like, us as, like, WoW players, I like the fact that we can choose our server and play with the people that we decide to play with once we commit to that server. I think servers matter, but if it's like one big mega server and they didn't do this whole cross realm thing, if that's what they're like kind of like hinting towards what they want to do, I don't think this question even is really relevant, to be honest. At the end of the day, I don't really care about anything going on in cross realms. The only time that it matters in cross realms is when you're versing other realms in BGs. As far as like the servers that we pick, I like having a home. I like being part of like a Benediction. I like being part of a Faralina, or being part of a White Mane, or being part of a Crusader, or whatever server that I'm on. I don't really want to like break that feeling of losing the integrity of like the server that we're rocking with, you know what I mean? And even though our servers, like whatever server you're on, has its internal issues with like the players on Horde and Ally side, at least that's our issues, you know what I mean? That's our home. And I don't care so much about like the whole cross realm guilding If that's something that works in retail and people are doing that, then whatever. You know what I mean? I guess it's cool for like communication and talking with people in chat. So everyone feels like they're alive no matter what through any version of the game, and there's like great conversations to be had. But then at that point, motherfuckers are on Discord. You know what I mean? So it's like I don't really see the big hurrah to this question right here. So this one, I'll leave it up to you guys in the comments below. Let's talk about honor rewards redesign. Moving honor rewards away from the OG WoW model towards a more seasonal model, where new honor rewards are added to coincide with new PvE raid tier updates. I think they talk about this in particular, the way they're wording it makes sense in terms of like Season of Discovery. Well, now, with Season of Discovery, right, if you look at the PvE gear right now, the current moment with Scarlet Enclave, it is miles ahead of any PvP gear that has ever been put on the Season of Discovery server. It's still the same traditional gearing with some boosted stats, very minimal for the PvP gear in comparison to the anniversary gear. It's not good. Actually, no. What am I talking about? What am I talking about? Let's talk about the honor rewards. Let's talk about honor rewards redesign. Move honor rewards away from the OG WoW model towards a more seasonal model where new honor rewards are added to coincide with new PvE raid tier updates. And I think when you look at it like from this line of questioning, it kind of matches what's going on with Season of Discovery. Where in SOD, the PvP gear was good for some time, but then it turned to dog shit the more powerful classes got with PvE raid gear. And now that PvE raid gear, for the most part, for a lot of classes, not every class, but for most classes, I would say, and they would tell you right now that they are using PvE gear or PvE gear hybrid with some PvP pieces just for some stamina buffs. But the PvP gear, in terms of power, is dog shit comparison to PvE gear. Like, PvE gear is doing astronomical damages of numbers on the boards in comparison to what PvP gear will provide for you. And this is not saying that PvP gear is not utilized, but it's just not as cool as we would love to see it in Season of Discovery for a game that's supposed to discover new things. We didn't really discover any new cool set bonuses for PvP where we could have saw different playstyles and different, battlefield reactions on the Battlegrounds, where we saw a player having a 6-piece PvP set and they're doing cool new things with this PvP set that we've never seen before, and really giving more support to the PvP gearing instead of just, massively overscaling the PvE raid gearing. And it's really hard to come up with a system in place that matches everybody's happiness when it comes to what's going to be the best new system. Me personally, I'll tell you that I liked what they did with TBC in terms of having PvP gear matter in arena and battlegrounds, and having PvE gear matter in actual PvE rating scenarios. But then you would have those small little pieces between both that you could maybe bring in a PvP piece or so into PvP, or a PvP piece into PvE, because it was not a bad slot for that jewelry or trinket, right? But for the most part, I like separation between the two, but I also like scaling between the two, where they both scale, but just with different properties to change playstyles that are more unique to PvP and separates it from PvE, so you get a different flow of your character every time you enter a different scenario, like whatever you're choosing to do. Now, they have to be careful with this as well, because depending on how they rework like honor rewards or even honor per hour, which is a situation as well, because SOD players, we had a problem where people were taking advantage of honor per hour when Blizzard, put the update with the A/B marks, and people were just AFKing and quitting. That was a problem, and I really came hard to the community about that. I was saying, this is bullshit, bro. Like, people are playing the game wrong, and they're just cheesing their way to get PvP gear, and this is not cool. This is not fun. This is not what PvP is all about. When I play a PvP game, because I guess I come from a more competitive background, especially from a shooter background, I like to be involved. I like to play with my teammates, you know what I mean? Or if you play like League of Legends or Smite or Dota, whatever, I like to be involved. I like to play with my teammates. I don't want to just AFK there and just accept defeat all the time. Now, it's cool to lose, because if you get into a good game, that's not a problem. But I like to actually go for a win. That's just me. Maybe not everyone's like that, but that's what PvP is all about to me. And when you look at the other side of the spectrum of Anniversary, Alterac Valley is a main concern of mine, because for a lot of people, they are just AFKing and just going in there to just get it done and AFK because of that gear, because the gear is so super strong. And you could say, well, you're just choosing to do that. You're just choosing to put yourself in that situation. Yeah, you're absolutely right. People are choosing themselves to get one of the best fucking gearing in the game via the easiest fucking thing to do. It's a no-brainer. Anybody who has a fucking brain is going to do that, and let's not deny it. Like, you're going to want to get that rank 14 gear and be an absolute fucking Chad going into raids and then getting even better gear or using that gear for actual BGs. So obviously people are going to take advantage of that, and if they could get a nice fucking end game piece to, you know, AFK and then just wait for fucking TBC to come out and log out, some people might do that too. That's just a choice. But what I'm saying is that Blizzard is giving that choice to players because the AV system is kind of dog, to be honest with you. It's not a good system, and I'm not really fond of that type of system for, you know, Classic Plus. And let me ask you this, because this is a good question. If the current Alterac Volley model from Anniversary was staying within Classic Plus, and they said the same model we're using in AV to get your rank 14 gear is going to be the same model in Classic Plus, would you guys actually like that? I think no. Because I have players that are doing the same thing, friends of mine who are doing it on more than one account, by the way, and they're saying, no, I would not like this. This shit's horrible. I actually like to play the game. I actually like to be involved in Warsong Gulch. I actually like to be involved of Arathi Basin, do open world PvP. I like to be involved. I don't like this system. That's the reality, and me personally, I think that is the major flaw right now of Anniversary. Everything else, regardless of any other side conversation outside what we're talking about, that's stuff to talk about another day. But this is just what I care about in terms of honor reward design, and hopefully that PvP gear matters and it has cool new ways to be a part of the video game come Classic Plus, and they handle it with some care. Achievements, I don't mind if they do achievements personally. Like, it doesn't really bother me. I believe they did achievements in a Season of Mastery, so I'm not here to really be an achievement Andy. You know, there's really no hate for me from this one. You know, the last time I really cared about achievements was just playing on retail a bit here and there, but for the most part, if they did it, it's not something that I'm really like, oh, like this is game breaking. Nah, I'm not really hating on that. If players want to enjoy their accomplishments, then by all means do that. 20-player raids, new 20-player focused raid dungeons. As far as, like, you know, new content, I mean, the only thing I will say is that if they're trying to make new stuff that is like on a design like a BRD, an Ubers, a Lobers, maybe I would say even just like Ubers alone, right? Maybe Ubers alone would be pretty interesting. Like, to that magnitude of that scale of a size of a dungeon, it would be cool. But I hope they just don't like have like long ass RP like they had in Ubers, where you're like talking to Ren for like 15 minutes. You can go AFK and make a snack. That's kind of a, you know, a snooze fest. It's alright for like the first time, but then after a while, like, it's kind of like boring. So I would say, yeah, I'm not opposed to new dungeon / raiding content. If it's fun and players are having a good time, I really don't have a problem with this. If it's fun and players are having a good time, who am I to hate on this particular section right here? That just sounds cringe to me. So I think this would be something that any player would want to be involved with, especially if it's in Classic Plus and it's new content that we've never seen before. Hey, let it rip, bro. Let's go for it. In-game events, new events that offer different small quests and casual gameplay around the world. These would release between large updates. So basically, like filler things you can do. I don't really hate this. I think it's an incentive for players to revisit maybe old areas they've never done before. As long as these quests actually matter, maybe they offer like consumables or some type of gold or reward that is satisfying for the player giving the need and want to do these, then yeah, it would incentivize players being involved in older areas that they have not once visited. Because I think one of the main problems is that a lot of places that you go to in World of Warcraft, after you outlevel them, you never go back there again. So if there's in-game events that give the player a reason to want to go back to that side of the world again, then the reward has to match that. And if the reward matches that, then you're going to see some very interesting confrontations between both Alliance and Horde. And I think that will offer some very fun, immersive style gameplay where you're going to be wanting to go around the world to do more of these in-game events because they're very fun. And maybe some PvP can happen. Maybe some cool little PvE activities can happen. And I think so on and so forth. That would be something that I'd be very intrigued about. I don't think this is a bad idea. I think this helps spark up the life in zones that are going to basically get out leveled at a certain point, and then you wouldn't see people eventually in those places after a long time in the games being out in the long run. So the in-game events might be a really good idea. Account-wide collections, making all pets, mounts, and toys available to your characters on your account. I think this would be cool. I'm not really a hater on, people having fun with like cosmetics. I know there are, WoW Andies out there that hate the fact that people get like cosmetics and they think it's, too close to retail and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's 2025, man. Who cares, bro? Are we really hating a person has a toy in their backpack? Is that really ruining your life? Is that the end all be all you think about when you're having breakfast? Like, bro, who gives a fuck, man? Let people have any fucking toy they want. I don't care about this. If it's not affecting me pushing my buttons and it's not affecting the person I'm fighting in PvP or in PvE in a raid scenario, I don't think this is doing anything that is bothering my life to, oh my god, Blizzard is ruining my immersion. They're killing it. I mean, this is something that I think is too overthought by traditional classic loyalists who just don't want no changes at all, no nothing. The game has to eventually evolve, and maybe not for you, but I think there'll always be that fresh server there for you. But when it comes to Classic Plus, I don't think this is a big ordeal, personally. Let people just fucking enjoy what they want to enjoy. For new trade skills, new primary and secondary professions, I think this is very scary. It's a very simple line of questioning, but it's very scary because if a new profession comes out, along comes with new ways to interact with the game, which is cool because it gives players a new way to approach Classic in terms of how these new items, or whatever they are, scale with their classes. But at the same time, is it going to be something that matches the power of like one of the best professions in the game in Classic, like engineering, right? Or blacksmithing maybe for some people, or alchemy or tailoring. I would say engineering is mainly one of the biggest kings in Classic overall. But is it going to scale to that extent, or is it going to be more powerful? And if it's more powerful, then it needs to be nerfed. And if it scales to engineering, then you have to look at other professions to try to pick those up as well. And then it becomes a very tricky thing to really understand. So I think it's cool in a way because it adds more interaction with new toys to play with and new things that you can, change the way PvE and both PvP work, and also the economy, which is another big thing too, on how people look at certain things. But as in terms of where it can go, it can get very haywire and get very crazy. It can get insane to the point where it might, break certain aspects of the game if it's too strong. As far as secondary professions, like if there's nothing like, crazy about them, then I don't really see a problem with secondary professions. But even sometimes secondary professions can add more power boosts to like your characters as well, like cooking, for example. Like having different style cooking buffs can really fucking amplify damage for you, in raid, and that becomes like a whole nother way of changing the game. So it really depends on the secondary profession, like fishing as well. That's another way because it matches with cooking. Maybe they would make some other unique style secondary profession that would be very fun. I don't know. I'm not too sure, but I will say this, right? I'm not totally against adding more professions to the game because I think it's a cool way to have players interact with things they've never done before. And also just spice up the economy. It would also spice up trade chat. It would spice up a lot of things. So in a way, I'm not really hating on this. This is not something that I have a super negative to. I just say take a slight caution with this one, but not like overly concerning, right? So I would go from there. And then they say at the bottom here, honor system redesign. So I guess this is a change from honor rewards redesign. A ground-up redesign of the honor system, removing the hard honor cap, making the system more evergreen and continually engaging. Huh. So, removing the hard honor cap, so no longer you would have a cap of like rank 5 to rank 8 or rank 8 to rank 10, just removing the cap totally, and like, would there be any decay? I don't know what they mean by this in particular. Like, how engaging are we trying to get with this honor redesign, and how much honor per game would people get? Because like I said earlier, you really have to be careful on how you handle this. Is it going to be like the sod way in AB, where people were quitting and just letting people kill them and lose? Are you going to treat it like Alterac Valley and Anniversary, where people were just simply just AFKing, smart collision, mouse target the sky and just run north or run south? Like, how are you gonna handle this? I'm not too sure, but removing the honor cap, I think in a way it can work, but at the same time, if that PvP gear is so strong to the point where it removes the incentive to have players want to do PvE at all, and it abandons all the old dungeons, then people are not going to want to have a reason to do Scarlet Monastery. People are going to not have a reason to want to do Mara. People are not going to have a reason to want to go to Zul'Farrak. You're going to remove reason behind your PvEing, so then you're going to affect PvE with this as well. So you really have to tread carefully when it comes to your honor re-reward design that you talked about earlier and your honor system redesign. So this is something that I really hope you get as much data as you can. Talk to your PvEers, talk to your PvPers, and have genuine conversation about this, because you're not going to get good insight from a PvEer about PvP, and you're not going to get good insight from a PvPer talking about PvE. You have to separate the both and talk about it with both communities, because there's those two sub communities in the total community that care about two different things. So you really have to understand where these individuals are coming from, so you can have a very fun system in place that everyone can try to enjoy, and I think that's the best way of going from there. Just tread carefully is what I'm saying. New race and class combinations. So this one's new class race combinations, including those never before seen in Warcraft. This goes back to what I was talking about with Death Knights and the Demon Hunters and all that stuff. It really enters the world of like even private servers, what a lot of these private server Andes are doing, and how there is a lot of crazy things we've just never seen before that a lot of private servers offer. I know a lot of people in the comments talk about Turtle Wow, they talk about Ascension, all this stuff. But for the most part, I really feel like that it can get a little haywire if you really start implementing new things into classes that take away from the fantasy of those classes, where now this class doesn't feel like it once was, and it's not the traditional classic class that I once played, and it removed the integrity of enjoying that class, because it can just do things that another class can do. And then when you start entering that playground, you start entering the retail playground again, where now more classes have the answers to everything, and there's no longer weaknesses to classes, which every class deserves to have a weakness. Every class deserves to have a caveat. And yes, you can add some supplements to improve a player class to be a little bit more involved when it comes to raiding or PvPing, but at the same time, that's what the gearing is also there for as well, when it comes to like set bonuses and how we were talking about PvP updates, where it interacts with your talents maybe a little bit more spicier than ever before, but not to a crazy extent where it's game breaking. So it's something you have to be careful with, and I really hope there are some cool little changes when it comes to maybe some class combinations, maybe some new races, but at the same time, this can also get scary as well, like I think this also hints towards, like, for example, like a dwarf mage, right, where now a dwarf mage can have stone form, and they can also be moving around very fast. It would make a nightmare for a rogue, but I'm just telling you right now, this is something that I think that it can be done. I'm just looking forward to how it would be done. And what do you guys think about this in particular? Because this leads to a lot of conversation. Would you guys like to see new races and more styled class combinations that we've seen different from Classic, but it doesn't ruin the integrity of Classic? So just let me know in the comments below. Player housing. Instance personalized housing for players and guilds. Personally, I don't mind this, really. I don't care. I think this is cool. It gives more RP things to do, especially for the RPers out there that care about, living in the world of Azeroth, living in the world of Kalimdor, and just macking, having a good time. I don't really have an issue with this for the most part. I think this is something that's pretty cool. I'm really happy that retail's actually getting this. I think a lot of players are very looking forward to this. And other MMOs like in FF14, they have this already. So why not? Like, who cares, right? This is something that offers a really cool, cozy experience. And sometimes players never really want to log off the game. They just want to have fun, you know. They just want to chill. But give them another area where they can have a good time at. So you know what? This is not hurting classic WoW, in my opinion. If anything, this is adding a little bit more unique things to do and have fun with, you know, maybe your friends, you know, maybe some people, you know, fucking, there's like husbands and wives out there that meet their fucking, you know, fiancés on this video game. Who gives a fuck, you know what I mean? I know tons of people like that, and they would probably love something like this because they just love classic WoW, and maybe they just don't want to do retail, you know? So I don't really see a problem with this one. Maybe, you know, leave your comments below, but I don't really see an issue with this one. Now, let's go to the next one. 40-player raids. New 40-player focused raid/dungeons. Now, this one in particular, I am not against. I just think 40-player dungeons sounds a little weird. And sometimes when I read some of these things on this list, this what leads me to believe that maybe this list is not legit and it's not real, because, like, where's, like, the slashes between raid dungeons? I mean, why are they asking about 40-player dungeons? That sounds weird. I don't think that's something that they would consider. Maybe a new 40-player raid, yeah, but dungeons? That's a little interesting. But for the most part, I wouldn't mind a new 40-player raids, like, you know, Scarlet Enclave, like more like raids of, like, you know, that magnitude. That's cool, right? You know, not to like that, you know, craziness of, like, you know, the first week and first two of Scarlet Enclave, where for a lot of people it was like extremely hard. But I'm saying in terms of like having new content, I think that's a cool idea. 40-player dungeons is a bit much. I'm more of like a more, you know, BRD style dungeon or Ubers. I think that's cool. Or 20-player, all right. No big deal. But anything past that, I think maybe it might be too crazy, unless they're making some massive scale new BRD style thing with like one of these new zones if they ever decide to do that. But at that point, that might be a little intense. Maybe people would like that, though. You know, who am I? I'm more of a person that enjoyed things like Gauntlet. If you remember Gauntlet Dark Legacy, I even was like looking it up just to remember the name. But I was like, man, I remember like how dungeon crawler that was, and, you know, just moving around and having fun and being like in tight, close corridors. I just like stuff like that. That's just me. But, you know, let me know your thoughts and opinions below on what you guys feel about, you know, more 40-player content-based things. Another one is playable High Elves. High Elves-like race for Horde and Alliance. As long as they're not a busted race, and they're not to the point where everyone is going to pick, like, you know, an 80-20 majority of the server is High Elves, or a 70-30 majority of the server is High Elves, that's fine. If you want to put High Elves, put High Elves. You know what I mean? In this situation right here, more races are cool as long as they are not busted and not super player favored in terms of everyone is only playing that race now. But at the same time, if there's a new race, a lot of people are going to play a new race because it is, you know, fun to play a different looking character aesthetic. So I don't hate this. Playable Shamans on the Alliance side. Introduction of Shamans to the class of Alliance. Just like the, you know, Paladin, or if they want to do a Paladin thing on Horde, I don't care. Put Shamans in Alliance so both sides can stop bitching already. There we go. New player character models. Character models similar to those you use for player characters in the modern World of Warcraft. I think it would be cool if they updated the models a bit, for sure, you know what I mean, to add a nice visual pop to the eyes, even though I already like what Classic looks like. There's, like, for a good example, if you look at, for Warlocks, I think Greek Warrior will talk about this, how if you look at the succubus, the male succubus compared to the woman one, the male model looks way better, and the woman one looks more outdated. So if they were to add more enhanced character models, I wouldn't mind that, as long as, like, the visual pop is pleasing on the player's eyes. Players, I don't think they care about that all the time, but at the same time, they don't mind, like, you know, stuff looking clean, you know, stuff looking sexy, all about that RP, baby. Yeah. New Battleground, new objective-based PvP instance. Yeah. Please do that. Please do that, for the love of God. We've been doing AV, AB, and Warsong Gulch forever, and I don't mind doing it forever in Classic, but at the same time, please, if you're going to add these new zones, you know, a Hyjal Battleground, anything, bro, a Caverns of Time style Battleground where it's like through instance and different cool, unique ways to get behind the enemy lines through portals, I don't care, bro. Come up with something. Please, at least also for the traditional Battlegrounds, and just in PvE overall, add dynamic weathering. Cargos was talking about this on the podcast the other day. please add dynamic weather to the Battlegrounds so it feels more alive, that we're feeling we're in an ever-changing season, and it just is just a new way to fucking have fun with the video game. And I'm sorry I'm stuttering there, but I just really am passionate about this particular subject. As a person who was playing Season of Discovery, and I remember me and Olympic and a couple of my other friends, Steven as well, we were up there with HKs when we were checking like other websites on how much HKs we had in the leaderboards, on how many times we spammed Battlegrounds. We were up there in the numbers, and we played Battlegrounds so fucking much to the point that was our life. You know, we just enjoyed it. And the one thing I would have been so cool if I saw Wrathy Basin started, you know, like fucking crazy rain and lightning and thunder, and just a little bit more aesthetic to the battlefield, more snow, a fucking, I don't care, a fucking hurricane going on. I don't care, dude. Just add some cool, badass weather effects, and then also new Battlegrounds. Like, I know it rains already in ABA, but I'm just saying, just please add some cool new things for BGs. Blizzard, that is one of the most, as a PvP player, I would fucking love this. That's all I'm saying. Graphical improvements to lightning shadows and surface reflections using modern technology to improve lighting engine in the game for more realistic light, shadows, and reflections on surfaces like water and grass. I don't think this is a problem. If you want to just give a person a setting, like here's a classic setting, here's the enhanced setting. If you want to give optional choices, go for it. Me personally, I have a good PC, I have a good rig. I'll fucking use the improvements. I like looking at really pretty aesthetic shit. That's just me. I'll go for it. Thumbs up. War mode, an alternate to PvP servers. This mode would allow you to opt into PvP in the open world via toggle in the main faction cities. This is debatable. Some people will say they like this. Some people will say they don't. I think personally this is more in favor of PvE players who just don't want to be in a PvP world and get ganked all the time. But at the same time, there's a reason why players go to PvP servers is because they want a PvP. They want to be a part of a world that is called World of Warcraft, and not just World of Craft. And I like to be a part of that war. You know, I like to be a part of the open world. I like to be a part of, you know, fighting other players for resources and stuff of that nature. So me personally, I personally like PvP dedicated servers. I don't really care if they decide to do a war mode or not. At the end of the day, I'll still be BGing. I'll still be doing arenas if they offer, obviously, an arena setting. But this is more for the PvE, Andes, and I'm guessing, how are you guys feeling on this? For anybody that's a PvEer, and you know, you're just a part of a PvP server because it's just very populated, and I understand that, right? And people want to go to populated servers and have fun. But as a PvEer, do you guys want the war mode because you just don't always want to get ganked all the time? Or would you just want the war mode totally not be an option at all? And for any PvPers as well, do you just want strictly a PvP server, and that's the choice you make, and live with the decision and go from there and deal with that friction? But let me know your thoughts in the comment below as far as how you guys feel about war mode. And now, graphical texture improvements and resolution upgrades using modern technology to improve fidelity textures used on classic art assets. Once again, just make it a setting for some people because, you know, at the end of the day, everybody will have a reason to bitch about something. Just put it in the game. I personally don't care. Once again, I have a rig that can handle it. Let it rip. New class and abilities and spells. Brand new class abilities that are unique to this version of Classic. You got to be very careful on how you do this, because when you introduce new class abilities, how are they going to interact off of procs and, you know, CDs, and also damage per ticks, and the effects based off of other talents that you spec into, and how amplified is this damage going to be to the point where now it is almost considered game breaking, and now that class is just the new meta class, right? You have to be very careful with this. I like it though. On pen and paper, like when you put the pen to the paper, I think this is cool. Like, there are ways to spice up other classes and give them things that we've never seen before, as long as it makes sense to the game, and as long as it's not something that is so overtuned that when we go to look at the metrics and we look at the data, we're like, holy shit, like this class is just overpowering everyone, and now we're in a whole nother, you know, traditional vanilla warrior setting where warriors are just miles ahead, right? And this is something we'll probably talk about later on too, because I just peeped they're talking about talent adjustments at the end. For the most part, I think new classes and abilities, it would be cool to see in Classic Plus, because at the end of the day, I think more people want to see a little bit more interaction with individual specs on what they can do in both terms of PvE and PvP. Leveling profession improvements. Ability to make more usable gear for yourself as you level and be able to craft it at level appropriate trade skill levels. I think it's cool, the concept, you know, on pen and paper. Like, I could see the idea of it, where yes, you are every other level, like now you can also make something for yourself, and every time you are in the world, you are gathering materials, so you don't feel like you're left out on gear, and anything that you get matters for that one level. But I think that's where it should lead to, is that only that one level, because the thing is that there's a reason why there's dungeons in the game. There's a reason why there's BOEs, right, in the world, right? And I really feel like those matter, and you farming and you pushing yourself to get all this stuff matters. Now, this gear should definitely can carry you to a certain extent if this is what they're talking about, like this like kind of green gear or maybe blue low level gear that just really holds you off until the next level. But at the same time, if you make it too strong, it's going to take away from your incentive to visit Scarlet Monastery, all that stuff I was talking about earlier, and want to get pieces in there. For like example, in SM, you can go for Orb, Hypnotic Blade, you can go for all the Herod stuff, you can go all the stuff off of White Mane and Mograine as well, right? And there's a lot of other pieces that you just like totally skip over, even in library, like Hypnotic Blade, like I mentioned. I think they want to be a part of those dungeons, and they want to get that gear and get those cool drops. But at the same time, you know, this is a cool implementation as long as it's done right with reasoning, and it's not always something that is the only option you need to choose and skip all of the content. But they could offer some endgame options to this as well, which can make it a little spicy, which I think would be really cool. So yeah, maybe we can throw this into the mix as a consideration more than anything. Cross-realm play, ability to group with other friends from other realms for dungeons, battlegrounds, and other instance activities. This is a retail thing. I don't really like this one, in my opinion. I think the more and more we start dipping into retail things is where the game starts to lose its quality of what Classic really is. As far as like dungeons, battlegrounds, that already like happens. Like, you know, we already are going cross-realm with battlegrounds by fighting other people from other servers, but that's the only time, right? Besides that, I think it's really cool to have the exclusivity of picking a server and being on that server. That's just how I feel, right? And I'm not hating on, you know, my decision's not finalized. That's just how I personally feel. But when we start dabbling around with this, we start to open the door to more and more retail style things that it just doesn't stay to the traditional classic setting for a game that's supposed to be called Classic Plus, right? That's supposed to be, you know, keeping the integrity of what that world was. So I think servers matter, I think choices matter, and I think the only time that should happen is with Battlegrounds. That's my personal decision, but I'm not hating on if people like cross-run play. If they want that, by all means, voice your opinion in the comments below. Now on to the controversy chat, the WoW token, the drama. A secure, convenient way for players to exchange gold for game time or BattleNet balance. Absolutely not, Blizzard. Don't do this, guys. If you guys do this shit, players are just going to find other websites that are more convenient than your WoW token. I'm being honest with you. The WoW token's not a good idea. Don't do it. Please, just pack that up. Please don't consider that. That is not what you want for the future of C+, and players are just going to find alternatives, man. I'm telling you. There's more bot accounts than there is players on a lot of fucking World of Warcraft servers. So that's just the way it is, right? But let's just go from there. Playable Paladins on the Horde side. Same thing I said with Shamans earlier. I don't care. Let's stop the bitching. Move on. And finally, the last one, which is very important. I think it's the most loaded question on this list. Class talent adjustments. Streamlining and improving class talent trees to make weaker specializations and classes more viable, while still maintaining the overall feel and flow of classic combat. Now, this is something you have to be very careful with, because we were talking about new classes, abilities, and spells, but then when you look at it from a Season of Discovery standpoint, where they made a lot of classes more viable in PvE, and a lot more classes were more tight-knitted. And we can make that comparison if we even look at, you know, traditional vanilla. Traditional vanilla had, you know, a lot of its sense and its structure based off of warrior damage. Warrior damage was due to a lot of world buffs, a lot of debuffs from other classes, and overall was being, you know, the king of top class to bring into your raids. And this is just from a DPS perspective. A lot of others, their changes are different with tanks and healing, but we're talking just from the damage metrics on how they were balancing their PvE overall, because damage is one of the highest played classes in World of Warcraft, you know, being a DPS class. And we look at how they tried to balance that out, and they did a comparison from, you know, from Naxxramas at the end of vanilla
we look at all the way at the current state of Liberation of Undermine and Retail, and how a lot more classes are tight and knitted to each other. And even though you see a class at the very bottom, like Balance Druid, being here 1 week, and a couple weeks, Balance Druid might be up here. If you see Shaman is down here, for example, both Shaman, Elemental, and Enhancement were actually top specs last season in the War Within at Narubar Palace. We can look at statistics, by the way, and we can see this. If we go to the 95th percentile, even if it's at max, look at where Elemental and Enhance are. Now they're at the top. And what's so good about what the War Within does is that they're always ever changing what specs are rising and falling between the two, you know? And they're trying to do a better job at finding a sweet ground of where they can find balance at, but they at least make several changes to, you know, find the good spot for classes. Now, of course, not all classes are always going to get risen to the top, but they try, right? And this is what I do like what Retail at least does with their damage metrics. But then we compare this to the Scarlet Enclave, and Season of Discovery kind of did a hybrid of what Retail did. If we look at this meter here, and we look at Season of Discovery and then see the fall off here, and then we look at Vanilla and see the fall off there where you have the three, but then there's that fall off, right? And it's a hybrid of kind of both. In a way, where it's like the War Within, but it's like Classic, where in a sense those damage metrics are more tight to each other, but they follow that line. The only time it really falls off is when we get to the Subtlety Rogue, and then down here to Arcane Mage, Arms Warrior, and Beast Mastery Hunter. But my whole point is this: if we change talents in a way where now we impact the game in such a method of removing player weaknesses and improving player strengths, then a lot more classes are going to feel a lot more stronger in ways that we've never seen before, and that might lead to either a lot of pros or a lot of cons for some people. Some people might not like the fact that everything is so tight compacted like War Within. Some people not like the fact that it's a hybrid of Scarlet Enclave, where classes are more tighter, but then they also fall off. Some people not like the fact that only one particular class is leading the charge compared to every other class. But this is all in a sense of talking of PvE. So how can we find the ground of making class talents work where there is that sweet spot and people are overall happy with the comfortability of saying, you know what, maybe we can bring more druids into this raid, or that type of druid into this raid. Maybe we can bring a couple more shadow priests into this raid. Maybe we can bring a couple more rep paladins into this raid. Maybe we can bring a couple more version of this rogue, or version of that warrior, or version of this class into this raid, and find a secure place where we're all extremely comfortable with this. Because this is a very big debate, and this can be a fall off for some people, where if things are too much like Scarlet Enclave, they're not going to be happy. If things are too much like, you know, Raid in, you know, War Within, and I know I'm showing Narubar Palace, but I'm just, you know, giving an example, or even, you know, Undermine, people are not going to be happy with this percentile. If people are seeing the same thing with Classic, they might not be happy. And the ultimate thing is here is that Blizzard, you're not going to make anyone happy. At the end of the day, you just have to make a choice. What kind of style of game do you want to choose? Do you want to choose the style of game where it leans more towards a couple classes leading the pack, and people just have to accept that not everybody can be first place? You know, I think that's something I can understand and respect, because where I grew up, in my life at least, not everybody's a fucking winner. You're going to have some fucking people in last place, but just because they're last place does not mean they're losers. There's always room for improvement. And sometimes, right, on a team, just because you have a person who's the core and the strength of your squad, without your team, you are nobody. Just like a warrior. If we look back, without a warrior, without having people giving him debuffs, helping him improve his damage, his metric drops off. The warrior's metric drops off because nobody else is giving debuffs. Or imagine a shaman not giving Wind Fury. Imagine if a rogue's not giving improved exposed armor, or if they didn't have a druid for wild strikes. Maybe they don't have a shaman, right? Or maybe they're not getting a fucking debuff from a priest or whatever. You know, I'm just saying. Or a paladin's not giving them a buff. The whole point is what I'm getting at, or what I'm trying to say, is that your team is what makes the strengths in this game. You know, and when it comes to the talents and how you approach specific things, it needs to be handled with care. And I don't mind if you want to go with this traditional setting, but at the same time, it would be cool to see a lot of all these other specs have a new way, shape, or form where they are improved as long as the balance does not affect the opposite side of the totem pole, and that totem pole being PvP, right? Because as you increase things over here, you have a Season of Discovery situation, because this, even though this does look like a nicer graph in a way, in Season of Discovery, a lot of these classes just fucking nuke other people. And this happens, right? In Season of Discovery, in PvP, it just feels like people are getting nuked left and right in player versus player in the world. But in PvE, a lot of people really like the raiding scene in SOD, and they like the way their buttons feel. So I really think that you can find some type of middle ground, or just choose your decision and stick with your guns and saying, we're staying in a more classic sense like this for PvE, but we're making slight adjustments where maybe Marksmanship Hunter's no longer at the 50th, rating score. Maybe they're at 65. Maybe the Feral Druid's at 63. Maybe the DPS Warlock is at 70, and it's fighting with the Fire Mage, Maybe the Shaman and Paladin are both fighting with each other around the 50 to 60 range, Maybe the Frost Mage is a little bit better this time, and maybe it's just slightly behind the Warlock. So it's about really pumping these numbers up, but not to the extent where it affects the PvP side of things, and that's where the split balance comes into play, and it's a very hard conversation. This is not something that's easy to talk about. It can lead to tons of discussion in a room for hours upon end, and I don't think something we will ever find a finite solution to. But it's good that we have these conversations, because I think it's important for us to find the differential in things when it comes to where we can finally find some happiness, I guess to say, with World of Warcraft, which is kind of a rarity nowadays. But I think they definitely can mess around with talent adjustments. There can be things that can happen, but not to an extreme nature, right? We can't hit it like they did in Season of Discovery, but we also can't even go or even touch the realm of retail. We have to just have that slight little adjustment on classes and players feeling like they're enjoying the buttons they click, enjoying the spec that they want to play this time around, and feel like they're more happy with it, but at the same time not lead to the broken scales and always monitor balance. And then in that world, I think talent adjustments can happen. I know that was a very loaded conversation. Maybe some things I'm not always right on. And listen, I'm going to just say this right now, because I just want to leave this off of my outro. Some people I've seen in the comments lately, there are some people that are been very aggressive, and they might disagree with me on everything. Some people might attack me, and they just don't like me. That's fine. I'm not here for everybody to like. I'm here to talk about the truth and be real. I'm not here to, give you bullshit. I like speaking my mind, and I like telling you my opinions on things. Once again, everything I say is just opinion based. I'm not going to be here for you guys and bullshit around the bush and say that, World of Warcraft Classic Plus is going to be perfect, or if they do this and that, this is going to lead to a better game. To be honest with you, it might lead to more problems more than ever, but it's how we get through those problems together, and how we talk about these problems and open up conversations that lead to solutions that we can possibly see in the future. And without these conversations, and without these discussions and sometimes even debates with some people in the comments, we'll never get anywhere. So please understand, don't take this with me attacking any version of your game personally and taking this so serious, because I think some people do. And there was going to be a video I was going to do talking about the player mental health in World of Warcraft. I don't know if I want to do that video, but if you guys want to see that video, I might shoot that outside, and we'll talk about it outside, just chilling, maybe smoking a stogie or drinking a beer or two. Settle down, I'm just kidding, much love to you. But we'll see. But besides that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and much love to you. I hope you enjoyed the conversation for today. I know it was a long one, and we're going to chop this one up and put it on YouTube and go from there. So I'll catch you in the next one, amigos. Keep on keeping on all that good stuff, and I'll see you later. Editor, how the fuck do I end this video nowadays? You know what? You're getting shot in Minecraft, young man. Yeah, no, you're done. You're done.